it on so that you can hear. Is that, we're not streaming that live yet, are we? Yeah. Good evening. If you're joining us again, I'm very pleased to welcome you. I know we've got an audience here in the hall, but I also know that we've got an audience via the internet. And if you're watching us via the internet, let me welcome you to our presentation tonight. This is week 9. There are 2 more presentations. And the interesting thing is, on week 9, we're doing chapter 6 of Daniel. And then next week, we're doing chapter 9 of Daniel. And the week after, we're doing the climactic chapter of Daniel, chapter 10. So if you're joining us tonight, welcome. And we're very pleased to have you, as I'm pleased to have this audience here in the room. We've been talking to you about the possibility of getting a copy of the presentation that we give the people here in the room. This is a handout showing all of the slides that are up on the screen. And to get this handout, all you need to do is to go to our website. And the website is on the bottom of the screen, or should be on the bottom of the screen, Mornington Peninsula SDA.org, and there you'll see the appropriate buttons about the Daniel seminar. Press the button and you can download a copy of the video or a copy of this handout, which is a PDF file. So you'll be able to have this information as a permanent record. So that's an offer that we've got for you, and I hope if you are interested that you will download what you want. Now normally we start with a graphic which introduces the chapter, but I wanted to just raise a couple of points with you first tonight. And you'll remember over the last few weeks I've been telling you that we're following Daniel chronologically. Now there's a difference between chronological and the way the book is laid out. It's laid out in chapters, and the life of Daniel and his friends comes in the first 6 chapters, and the prophetic visions of Daniel come in the chapters 7 to 12. The trouble is, Daniel's life and the lives of his friends wasn't a compartment. The visions happened during his life, and the events happened during their life, and when you study them chronologically, you get a different understanding, a different picture. Let me just draw your attention to how this is significant. We're dealing tonight, chapter 6, with, chapter 6 is Daniel in the lion's den. Last week, we did the fall of Babylon. The fall of Babylon and Daniel in the lion's den all happened in the space of 1 year. Babylon fell, and Daniel was put into the lion's den during that same year. But that's not the only things that happened at that time, because Daniel made a prayer asking for forgiveness for his people. And when he made the prayer asking for forgiveness, he was given the vision of the coming Messiah. And he was told how much time his people had. But let's go to what's on the screen. The fall of Babylon and Daniel's interpretation of the writing, and I've also put on this point 1, also the prophecies that name Cyrus as conquering Babylon. When Babylon fell, if you remember from last week, Belshazzar was throwing a banquet for all of his lords and all of his special army officers and friends. They were having a banquet, and in the middle of the banquet, a hand came and wrote on the wall beside the lamp so that everyone could see what was being written. Now, it wasn't that the hand traced the lettering on the wall and then it disappeared. The hand actually wrote and left writing on the wall, because Daniel came later. So when Daniel came, he read the writing that was on the wall. And we talked about this last week, remember. And Daniel interpreted what the writing meant. And if you remember back to last week, it was Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, which was, you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting, and your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So Daniel was prophesying that the Persians who were outside the wall of Babylon would actually conquer Babylon. The same night, they entered the city by wading up the river and coming in through an open gate. They came up the river and through a gate that had been left open, and they took the city. And Belshazzar was killed. Now, for a moment, just remember this concept. The writing was on the wall and Daniel read it later. When Cyrus, the king of Medes and the Persians, came into that banquet hall looking over the palace that he'd just conquered and taken by force, do you think he might have seen something written on the wall? And if he saw it written on the wall, would he have said, "What's that on the wall?" And do you think that the people that were there would have told him what had actually happened in the banquet? And who interpreted it? And what he said? He told Belshazzar, Daniel told Belshazzar, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Within a few hours, the Medes and Persians had the kingdom. So do you think that might have impressed Cyrus? All right. So Daniel then makes a prayer and he asks for mercy, and in that prayer he's given the vision of the Messiah. After that, there is, in the same year, there is a plot to throw him in the lion's den. And that's what we're going to be studying tonight, the plot to throw Daniel in the lion's den. Now, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of the outcome. Daniel survives the lion's den. Now, let's put these things into their proper context. Babylon falls, Cyrus inherits the kingdom, and let's say he sees the writing on the wall and he's told the story. Also in the Jewish holy books, there are prophecies that name Cyrus as actually overthrowing Babylon. And the Jews would have shown Cyrus these prophecies. So he's seen the writing on the wall, he's been shown the prophecies, Daniel gets put in the lion's den, and miraculously Daniel survives. Do you think that that might have had an impression on Cyrus? Do you think that Cyrus might have thought, well, I need to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem for these people, because look at these special things that these people can do. Their God does for them. I need to keep on this God's good side, you see. So that's where we've come to chronologically. So let's have a look now at chapter 6. And the theme of the book is Daniel in the lion's den. All right, so let's start our presentation. You've done this before. We've done it before, each chapter, and we've put it in its correct sequence. Remember, Israel was taken captive in 605 BC. In 602 BC, Nebuchadnezzar had his dream that he couldn't understand and Daniel interpreted. In 594, he threw Daniel's 3 friends into the furnace and they survived, and he was quite staggered by the event that people thrown into a furnace should survive. Then in chapter 4, Daniel warned him that he would become insane if he didn't become more humane in the way that he treated people. And he ended up ignoring Daniel's advice. So he was insane for 7 years. And then after he had passed away, his reign had ended in 560 BC, which tells you that his reign has gone for 45 years. He was followed by his son, then his son-in-law killed his son and took the throne. He died young. He put a young son on the throne, and then an army general by the name of Nabonidus came and took the empire, and then he installed his son as a regent. That was Belshazzar, and the regent was the one that was sitting up on the throne when Cyrus came and took the kingdom. So we've gone through those 5 first chapters of the book. Now we're at chapter 6, and chapter 6, Daniel is going to be in the lion's den, and this would have happened around 535 BC. Give or take an hour or 2. Okay, so that's the first half of the book. But also we've been looking at the second half of the book, the prophetic side of the book, so we need to put that up on the screen too. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, then Daniel had a vision, and the vision that Daniel had was the same vision that Nebuchadnezzar saw, but he used different symbols. Where the head was gold, in Daniel's vision, the head was a lion. The arms and chest of silver were a bear. The thighs were a leopard, and the legs and feet were a terrible beast from which a horn came up. It had 10 horns and another horn came up. And they were to continue, that last kingdom was to continue until the Ancient of Days sat in judgment. All right? There was 55 years between Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts. So Daniel, let's just give Daniel an age in this. Let's say Daniel was 15 when he was taken captive. All right? So 55 years have passed since he was 15. So what age does that make him? You're very good on your maths, some of you. You know it's 75. But you've got to add a couple of years to that. So he's in his late 70s before he gets the vision of the animals. He's an old man. So it means there's hope for me. All of you who are watching or listening here, If you're not yet into your 70s, there's still hope, isn't there? If you're in your 70s, you're looking forward to it. All right? Anyway. And 55 years after Daniel gets his vision, he gets the final vision, and that so he's going to be, before he finishes his work, he's going to be in his mid-80s. And so let's, all right. Oh, I pushed the wrong button, so let me. This will take a second to run through. It's automated, friends. I'm sorry about that. I should watch the buttons that I push. Okay. We're ready, the Ancient of Days. Then Daniel in chapter 8 had the vision which was repeating what he had seen in the vision of chapter 7. But in this case, the bear was a ram and the leopard was a goat. And then the terrible beast was a horn. In Daniel chapter 8, if you remember, he was given a time frame. And the time frame was 2,300 years. But he didn't know when it started and he didn't know when it finished. It just worried him. And when he was told that time frame, he couldn't handle it. He couldn't imagine that time and he fainted. So he didn't get the last part of the vision. So now we've come down to the fall of the Babylonian Empire, and we're now in the first year of the Medo-Persian Empire. And we're now in the year 535 BC, give or take. All right, so we're now 70 years from when we started. And we're going to look now at what happened in this first year. And it all has to do with the fall of the Babylonian Empire and the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire. So let's look at the historical artifacts that talk about this. There is what's called the Cyrus cylinder. It's a clay cylinder that's 9 inches long, and if you're into metrics, it's 27 centimetres, or something like that. Any rate, it's that big. It states, Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon, had perverted the cults of the Babylonian gods. And remember back when he first took over this, we explained to you that the gods of Babylon were Marduk and the god of the sun. But when Nabonidus became king, he replaced Marduk and the gods of Babylon, and he replaced them with Sin, the god of the moon. And he required people, the populace of Babylon, each year to do service for the gods. They hadn't done that before. So the people got very unhappy with him and that. And what this cylinder goes on to say is the imposed labour service on its free population who complained to the gods. The people complained they had to do this work. The god Marduk, the one that had been replaced by Nabonidus, chose Cyrus. And he ordered Cyrus to march on the city, which he entered without a fight. The people joyfully accepted his kingship. So Cyrus is doing a bit of propaganda. He's saying, I'm the king that the people wanted. This cylinder describes Cyrus not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. And it presented him as the legitimate successor to the crown of Babylon. All right, so that's the first cylinder. And it goes on and it says, when in Babylon, Cyrus performed the religious ceremonies Nabonidus had neglected. Only the king, on New Year's Day, could perform a special service that brought good luck to the city and the empire. Only the king could do it. He couldn't send his regent or anyone else. The king had to be there in person to do it. And he had gone off for 10 years rebuilding temples. And his son couldn't do the service. So the people considered that the city was having bad luck. All right? Well, Cyrus, he went and performed that ceremony on New Year's Day, not long after he captured the city. So he became the legitimate king of the old Babylonian Empire. But now he's the king of the Medo-Persian and Babylonian empires. All right? That, by him doing that service, it allowed him to claim the legitimate rule of the Babylonian and Medo-Persian empires. He explained to the Babylonians his empire would have a contract between himself and them. And they were to pay him their tribute. You do this today, but you don't call it tribute, do you? You call it tax. They were to pay their tribute, and if they paid their tribute, he would ensure that they could worship anyone that they wanted to. They were free to do what they wanted as people. And that. So the Jews were willing to pay their tax to him, so he let them go back to Jerusalem and build their temple. All right, so Cyrus the Great. The prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah said that Babylon would fall to the Medes. If you read your Bible, they say Babylon, the kingdom of Babylon, will be overrun, conquered by the Medes. Cyrus was the son of a Persian king, and his father was Cambyses, and his mother was Mandana, the daughter of the Median king Astyages. That's the best way I can present it. All right? So Cyrus's mother was Median and his father was Persian. All right? So he's got a foot in both camps. He's both Persian and he's both Median. All right? He decided in 559 BC, he became king of Persia. His father died and he became the king. He's the king and he decides that he doesn't want to be under his grandfather, who is the king of the Median Empire. So he said to his soldiers, do you want to be told what to do, or do you want to tell people what to do? And his soldiers said, we want to tell people what to do. So he said, all right, come and we'll take over the Medo-Persian Empire. And that's what he did. He defeated his grandfather on his mother's side, and he became the king of the Median Empire and the king of the Babylonian Empire. So he's king of both. But now it's no longer two kingdoms, it's now one kingdom, Medo-Persia. All right? The Medo-Persians had worked in very close harmony with the Babylonians. The Assyrian people had conquered them many years earlier, and the Babylonians and the Medes rose up and they defeated the Assyrians. Babylonian kingdom was the stronger one at that time, but now the Babylonian kingdom has weakened and the Medes and Persians have become strong. So there was a lot of harmony and common ground between the Medo-Persians and the Babylonians. All right? So what did Jeremiah in his prophecies say? The Lord has raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, for his plan is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance for his temple. The Babylonians had come down and conquered Israel, and they had conquered Israel 3 times. And in the last time, they literally burned the temple to the ground and destroyed the city. So there was nothing left for the Israelis to go back to. All right? Because the Babylonians had done this, God said, I will punish you. And he waited to the end of 70 years to punish them. But he did punish them. And he used the Medes to punish them. And this is what it says. Prepare against her the nations with the kings of the Medes, its governors and all its rulers, and all the land of his domain, and the land will tremble and sorrow, for every purpose of the Lord shall be performed against Babylon. Babylon did what God didn't want them to do. He used them, but they did what they wanted to do, and he just used that. Does that make sense? If you decide you're going to do something that isn't good, God can use what you do in some way so that people benefit from it in the end. And that's what it's saying here. But Jeremiah says, Isaiah has said the Medes, Jeremiah says the Medes. By the time that Cyrus captured Babylon, he had been king for 14 years. Why is this important? I'll show you in a minute. And would have been in his early 60s. He was killed in combat in his 7 years after he conquered, so he would be in his late 60s when he died, and it was 529 BC. All right? Isaiah also prophesied, had prophecies that related to Babylon. Thus says the Lord your Redeemer, who says to Cyrus, He is my shepherd. He shall perform all my pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, You shall be built. And to the temple, your foundation shall be laid. So Isaiah, writing in his writings, has said, Cyrus will rebuild the temple. So remember at the beginning when we're talking about these special things that God had performed that Cyrus would have seen, and we're doing the last one of these special things now. These were messages to Cyrus, I want you to go and rebuild my temple. All right? So let's go on. Isaiah says, Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus. In other words, God has chosen Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him, to loose the armour of kings, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut. I will go before you and make the crooked places straight. Cyrus's army entered Babylon through gates that were left open beside the river. This is prophesied as happening 100 years before it actually happened. So do you think that that might have impressed Cyrus when he saw these things written in the Jewish books? All right. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, who will not regard silver, and as for gold, they will have no delight in it. They didn't like gold and silver, but they were very good soldiers. So what you've got in these prophecies is a prediction about the Medes. Now, who is the king of the Medes when Babylon fell? The king of the Medes when Babylon fell was Cyrus. But Cyrus is Persian. So how do we make sense of that? But he's, on his mother's side, he's Median. All right? So this title, Cyrus, what does it mean? Well, it's a name all the theologians think it's a name. But then you're confronted with, in chapter 6, the word or the title Darius, which means Lord. I want you to understand this one fact because it will help sort out something that has troubled many people over many, many years. What's troubled people is, who is King Darius spoken of in the Bible? Because everyone thinks Darius was a separate king. But there were 3 kings in the Medo-Persian Empire that were called Darius or Darius. The first one ruled from 522 BC to 486 BC. So Darius the first, number 1, ruled 7 years after Cyrus was killed. So if you read the Bible, you will think that Darius ruled for 3 years and then Cyrus ruled. But there was no king called Darius before Cyrus. There were kings after, but not before. So what does that tell us? It tells us that this title Lord is being applied to somebody else. And they're saying Lord Darius, and then he could have said Cyrus afterwards. All right? But Cyrus is the king of the Medes, and Darius or Darius was a Median who sat on the throne. Well, Cyrus is Median. He sits on the throne. So the title Darius or Darius applies to him. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom. But you know that Darius is just a title meaning Lord, so it is saying the Lord of the Medes received the kingdom. So who's the Lord of the Medes? Cyrus is the king of both Media and Persia. So when you read in Daniel Darius, understand that it is actually talking about the first king of the combined Medo-Persian Empire, Cyrus. Okay? In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, now remember, who's Cyrus's grandfather? Who did he defeat? Ahasuerus. So his mother was the daughter of Ahasuerus, and Cyrus is Ahasuerus' grandson. Okay, so he could claim to be the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Babylonians and the Chaldeans. Okay? Wikipedia, I think you might have heard of Wikipedia, or I hope you've heard of Wikipedia. Wikipedia states Darius the Mede is not known in history. There was no Median by the name of Darius, because Darius means title Lord. It's a name of a title and it means Lord. And that no additional king can be placed between the known figures of Belshazzar and Cyrus. Who did God say that he was going to bring down and open the gates beforehand so that Babylon would fall to the Medes? Who did he say? Cyrus. Whose hand did he hold? Cyrus. Who was his appointed, anointed person to punish the Babylonians? Cyrus. So when it says Darius, or Darius, I get them back to front sometimes, whenever it says that, you know it's actually talking about Cyrus. Cyrus by birth and military action was both king of Media and king of Persia. Darius is a Persian title meaning lord of, possessor of. So Darius meant Cyrus, the king of Media and Persia. Daniel, who knew the prophecies, would have referred to Cyrus using the Persian title Lord or Darius, thereby correctly proclaiming Cyrus as both Lord of the Medes and the Persians. Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Daniel, I put my glasses on. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps. Sounds painful, doesn't it? But satraps are administrators, governors. So he sorted out and said, I'll have 120 governors to govern this whole kingdom. And over those 120, I'll set 3 more governors, of whom I want Daniel from Babylon and from Israel to be one. So Darius, Cyrus, and I'll refer to him from now on as Cyrus. Cyrus made Daniel one of the 3 governors. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors, the satraps, because of an excellent spirit was in him. So the king gave thought to making him even higher than the 3, making him the administrator over all of the governors. Just have one main governor. So the governors and the satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful. If you had found yourself captive to another group of people, and the group of people wanted you to work for them, would you have worked for them and done the best you could, or would you have refused to or worked against them? Scripture tells us that Daniel always did the very best he could in whichever job he was, because the Bible had said, do your very best. Work with these people. Don't work against them, work with them. And for that reason, they could find no fault in Daniel. Then these men said, we shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said to him, King Cyrus, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and the satraps, the counselors and the advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute to make a firm decree that whomever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, should be cast into a den of lions. So everyone should worship you for the next 30 days. Now, Cyrus was fairly liberal in his thinking. For his time, he was enlightened. So why would he think about a command that everyone was to worship him for the next month? What would have encouraged him to say yes to such a foolish proposal? Well, it could have been a bit of pride, but remember, the Babylonian Empire has just been conquered. And if you don't want to stir up the people, if you want to keep the people sort of going in the right direction, you put a few rules on them, not difficult rules. So he said, for the next month, you're going to worship me. And he thought that was probably a good idea. So he agreed to it. All right? But all of these are people who are plotting against Daniel that is suggesting it. Okay, so you weren't allowed to worship any other god except the king for the next month. So why did Cyrus consider that proposal? Well, we've just explained it, haven't we? Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Once the king put his seal on the law, it couldn't change. Nobody could change it. Even the king couldn't change it. So he signed it. Once it was signed, Daniel went to his house, went to the upper room in his house. It was 2-story. Most houses were then. You kept your animals underneath and you lived up above. And the heat from the animals and the smell from the animals kept you warm at night. All right. So he went to his front room and he knelt down facing Jerusalem and he prayed. And he did that 3 times that day. All right? So what did the administrators and all of those people do? Well, they went running back to the king. And when they went back to the king, this is what they said. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into a den of lions? And the king said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. In other words, I've signed it. That's what people have got to do. So what did they say? So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show regard to you, O king, or for the decree that you signed. They've trapped Daniel by tricking the king. All right? The king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself because he hadn't realized the deceit of the people that were trying to get rid of Daniel. He hadn't thought about the possibilities. So he set his heart to try and get Daniel out of the problem. But he couldn't do that. And then the people who had accused Daniel said this to the king. These men approached the king and said to the king, know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. These people are now threatening the king, saying, you've signed it, you can't change it. If you change it, we will make sure that you get into trouble. They're now plotting against the king as well. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and they cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke to Daniel, saying, listen to what a pagan king of pagan gods says to Daniel. Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. He will save you. Your God, whom you trust, he will save you. That's what the king said. Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it. Why did the king seal it with his seal? Why did he put the wax there or mud and then press his ring into it? because it stopped anyone getting into the den and killing Daniel by themselves. It protected Daniel. All Daniel had to do was to make friends with the lions that were hungry, that hadn't been fed for a long time. That's all he had to do. But the king was protecting him. And that. He did that so that nobody could interfere with what was going to happen. What would happen, and nobody could interfere and kill Daniel. Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No musicians were brought before him. Also, he didn't sleep. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a trembling voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" So he's asking the question, Daniel, have you been saved? He said when Daniel was put in, your God will deliver you. But he didn't know the power of Daniel's God. So when he came back, he asks a question, have you survived the lions last night? Did you make good friends with them? Did you pat them enough times? Did you do what you had to do? All of that sort of thing. Okay. But he recognized that Daniel was a servant of his God. All right? So what was the answer? Did an answer come? Did a lion roar, or did Daniel call out to the king? Well, you know the answer. Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before God, him, and also you, O king. I have done no wrong before you." Daniel is saying, I was innocent and I have survived. All right? Now the king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. Would you like to have been the guy on the end of the rope going down to get Daniel? But when the king says, you go down and you bring him up, all right. But he did. He went down and he brought Daniel out of the lion's den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions. Ooh. Those lions are now a day hungrier. They're even hungrier than when Daniel went in and cast them into the den of lions. He cast in them, their children, their wives. He cast in the whole family of each of the men into the lion's den. So there must have been a lot of lions there, because there were a lot of people. Okay. And the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they even got to the bottom. So you know how hungry the lions were. And the lions demonstrated it. And all of the people that were thrown in, the men, their wives and their children, all helped the lions overcome their hunger. All right. Then King Darius, King Cyrus, wrote this special decree. To all peoples, nations and languages that dwell in all of the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men shall tremble or must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God. See, all of the other gods that these people worshipped were stone, statues, or carved pieces of wood, or trees. But the God of Daniel is a living God, the only God that is a living God. And he is steadfast forever. His kingdom is one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. So Cyrus actually understood the true God of heaven, which is interesting, isn't it? And his domain shall endure to the end. He delivers and he rescues, and he works signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. Nebuchadnezzar was shown the power of God when God saved the 3 wise men of Daniel's friends that were thrown into the furnace. Now, 65 years later, Daniel is thrown into the lion's den, and Daniel survives. Daniel's 3 friends had their big ordeal back in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel's ordeal is in the time of Cyrus, and he survives. What is it that the 4 kingdoms in Nebuchadnezzar's dream have in common? I'm just for a couple of minutes, I want to show you something interesting. You mightn't understand this, or you mightn't have understood it. So let me show it to you and show you what is going to feature through the rest of the prophecies in Daniel and into the book of Revelation. Let me show you something, all right? Here's Europe and Asia. There's the map. And if the map went down a bit further, it'd even show you Zimbabwe. And that's important if you're watching on the internet. We have some people from Zimbabwe here, all right? So they understand where we're showing you, what part of the world we're showing you. All right? Where on that map is Israel? Well, you see the little red circle in the middle? That's Israel. Israel didn't do what God asked them to do. So God said, I'm going to have to punish you because you don't learn your lessons. I want you to be kind to each other, and you go around killing each other. I want you to don't steal from people, but you go and steal from them. I don't want you to tell lies, and you go and tell lies. So I've got to punish you. So what did he do? He sent Babylon to take Israel into captivity. So Israel got absorbed into Babylonian Empire. So what had happened to the Jewish people? They'd gone from the little place where they were, now they were spread over a bigger kingdom, weren't they? And God describes Babylon as the whole earth. He also described Medo-Persia when that came up as the whole earth. So Babylon has now fallen to the Medes and Persians. Now let me show you. There's the size of Persia, and there's the size of Media. So when Persia took over Media, this little kingdom takes over the much bigger kingdom. But what now happens is those 2 kingdoms take over Babylon. So what's happened to Israel? Well, the people of Israel have now gone from Israel to Babylon to Medo-Persia. So the truth of God is being spread with each time there is a kingdom that takes over. Medo-Persia was expansive, so it continued to expand. And just before it fell, it controlled this much of Asia. Medo-Persia then fell to Greece. The Grecian kingdom made it even bigger. Alexander conquered all of the Medo-Persian Empire, plus the Grecian Empire. So Israel has become Babylon, Medo-Persia. Now it is incorporated in all of the Grecian Empire. What's the next step after that? Well, Greece fell to Imperial Rome. So instead of pushing further to the east, now the knowledge of God through the Jewish people is being taken to the west, to Europe. So what's the one thing that each of these four kingdoms we've been talking about and will continue to talk about, what do they have in common? What's the one thing that they all have? Well, they all occupy or have Jewish people, God's people, living within them. So Israel, that wouldn't go out and tell people about God, once they were taken captive by Babylon, the Babylonians got to learn about God through the miracles that God did. Then the Medo-Persians got to know about the God of Israel through the miracles that were performed for Cyrus. Then the Grecians got to know about the God of Israel. And then the Roman Empire got to know about the God of Israel. So what happened after that? Well, after Jesus died on the cross, the message didn't stay with the Jews, the message went to the Gentiles. The Gentiles being everyone outside of Israel. It already gone to the Gentiles through the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians and the Greeks, but now it is going to go to those people in a special way. Okay, so what happened next? Well, Christ died on the cross and Paul went out to evangelize the rest of the countries in the world. So the little horn that came up from the terrible beast in Daniel chapter 7, and we'll hear more of this next week, the little horn became the pagan Roman Empire that was based in Rome. It now controlled the people of the world, the religions of the world. From that little part of Europe, we go to this map. Where on that map is Europe? There's the pink square. What happened to the pink square during the reign of the Gentiles? The people that Paul took the message of God out to? The church that was centred in Rome continued to go out and promote its Christianity to the rest of the world. So the Christianity which had been kept in Israel by the Jews now has spread through conquering powers to the whole world. The fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth. This is what it said in Daniel chapter 7, which shall be different from all other kingdoms and shall devour the whole earth, trample it and break it in pieces. The religion that they took to the rest of the world wasn't pure Christianity, but they took it. They took the knowledge of Christ and they took the knowledge of God to the people of the world, so that if the people of the world wanted to find the truth, they could open their Bible and learn what is true. All right? So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, in the reign of Cyrus, and in the reign... Sorry, let me read this again. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. This is the way that this text is written in the New King James Bible and any other Bible that you would like to read it. But it's suggesting that Darius and Cyrus are two separate people. Now, I've been showing you evidence tonight that that isn't the case. So what's wrong with this text? Let's have a look at it. The same verse, but instead of interpreting or putting in these two extra words, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian, the translators could have put in these two words. They mean the same. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, that is the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That makes sense. And that makes harmony with what we've shown you before. Those two words are added words, and the translators, because they didn't fully understand, said, and in. They should have really said, that is. And a theologian, and I've given you his name underneath, this is how he says it should be actually understood. Zdravko Stefanovic, in his book Daniel, Wisdom for the Wise. Nearly finished, friends. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit in Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth the Lord God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is among you, all his people, may his God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is God, which is in Jerusalem. This is the decree that Cyrus then made. So think back to the writing on the wall, the prophecies in the books of Isaiah and Jeremiah. Think of how Daniel had interpreted what was on the wall. Then Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den, and the king appeals to the God of Judah to save Daniel, and Daniel is miraculously saved. And one of those prophecies that he was shown told Cyrus he was to build the temple in Jerusalem. Do you think those events might have inspired him to do what was prophesied? A very interesting point. It was taken, I've taken this from the first chapter of Daniel, and it says, Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. That's the year he went into the lion's den. So Daniel, after the lion's den, didn't go back into administration. He retired because next week we're going to do you another one of these events that happened in this first year. But the week after, we're going to show you the special vision that Daniel had in retirement that unlocks all of the things that Daniel struggled with. Don't miss next week, but in particular, don't miss the week after, because it all comes to the climax, and you need to hear the climax and understand. If you haven't fully grasped it up to now, you will after, not next week, the week after. I thank you, friends, for joining us tonight. I should do the last slide, shouldn't I? Next week, Daniel chapter 9, Daniel is introduced to the Messiah, the Prince, and then the week after, Daniel actually meets the Messiah, the Prince. He does. Most people don't know that, but he does, and I'll show you the week after next. If you would like, remember, if you would like the handout of everything that we've put on the screen, go to our website, Mornington Peninsula SDA.org, and you can download the PDF copy of the handout, which will give you all of the information we put on the screen. And then by the weekend, tonight's presentation, the video of tonight's presentation, will also be on our website, as are all of the previous ones, so that if you've missed any, you can go and download them from our website. Thank you, friends. I trust you've enjoyed the presentation tonight, and I look forward to maybe speaking with you again next week. Good night, and God bless.